Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington. And today I'm joined by a good friend. We've actually spoken in the past about kind of other wedding events and things like that. And now I'm really excited to have her on the podcast. It's Janis Flagg of Greatest of Days. And Janis, why don't you kind of introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and just a little bit about what you do.
Yes, I started my event planning business in 2007 as a result of some people at a wedding reception. It was a friend's daughter's wedding that I had planned, and they asked me if I did it for a living. And I thought, well, yeah, I'm the first one that everybody comes to, whether it's family or friends. Jan could do it, you know. So I decided to give it a shot because I had enjoyed making events, no matter what they were, sentimental or comforting in the case of some events, and creative, so that it would take people from the point of stress to relief. And since then, it's been an adventure I could have never predicted. I never thought I would be writing a book, that's for sure. But I did.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of in preparation for the interview, and I want to thank you so much. We were talking kind of off microphone about you coming on last minute to kind of bail me out. We had a cancellation, and it's so great because I've seen you, and obviously kind of we've talked about on the phone before, kind of helping to write your book, and I always see you post online, and so I was so glad when you kind of obviously made time today and working through a lot of troubleshooting and technical issues of this online recording platform. And so thank you so much. Really is kind of looking through your site and everything you've done, and whether it's event planning, wedding planning, obviously public speaking, and now the book. I mean, how do you kind of manage all those different creative outlets that you have going on? It seems like it would keep you pretty busy.
I guess I thrive on stress or something. No, I think as long as I can be in some sort of creative mode, I'm happy. And I almost look forward to it when a couple comes to me and they present a problem, or I see a problem that's going to happen if they don't do something about it in the planning stages. I welcome that because that's a challenge, and it can be as simple as someone saying, yeah, we want to have programs in all the chairs for a wedding reception, and it's outdoors, and we know that there's wind that can destroy a number of things, but easily programs. What we did was we altered everything into a rock ceremony, and it was really kind of cool because the family of the bride had a cabin for decades, many generations, on a lake. And so they collected rocks for the rock ceremony from this really sentimental cabin that was in the family. It's just little things like that that can make the difference and solve a problem. And I think if you can make or use your creativity to turn a problem into something really cool, that's what I aim for.
That's awesome. So, talk to me kind of first and foremost, Greatest of Days, wedding and event planning company, kind of what do you guys do? What is kind of your mission statement? How do you kind of view that in terms of, your role in the wedding and event planning process?
Well, our motto has been creating memories to bring a smile to your face for years to come. And part of what brings a smile to my face is getting to be around people. And I actually, in 2008, had started a networking group that I had for 8 years called South King County Event and Wedding Vendors. And I loved connecting people with venues. And we had 60 meetings at 55 different venues in South King County during that time. And that was how I really got to hear what vendors were feeling and what they were experiencing. Ultimately, that led to my book, along with a TV show that made me mad when they put the industry under the bus. Took me a while to get the book written, but it's out there. It's good in a couple months.
Yeah. So why don't you? Yeah, we talked. I guess it was probably 6 months ago. I can't remember when it was that we kind of had our phone call about videography things. So talk about wanting to actually sit down and put pen to paper, and I don't know many that have actually gone through and written a book like that. So why don't you give a little bit of background about that?
Why I did it is when I saw the media in two different ways. On the expose shows, it was just really popular to say all these things like a DJ shouldn't charge any more for a wedding than for a child's birthday party. And I'm going, they're letting that misinformation get out there? That kind of makes me upset. And it made several people in the whole industry upset. And then I see all these shows that make it look like people can have a wedding that they can't have unless they have the budget of a TV production. And people have to choose their priorities and get real with their budgets. But it doesn't mean they can't have their dream wedding. That's where I think planners come in and start thinking of what we can do that will make their day special.
So you talked about how back in 2007 you kind of got, roped, for better or worse, were kind of roped into planning, and you had done some friends and stuff. So kind of before that, what was your background? What did you kind of study or want to do, or what was kind of your goal growing up in terms of, how you wanted to stay busy?
Well, in college, I actually majored in education and elementary education. And I think I am the best at communicating with ring bearers and flower girls of anyone out there. I just love them, as unpredictable as they are. I think it makes you really conscious, coming from an education type of background. You realize that everybody has a different way of learning things. And like an engineer is going to be a much different client than, say, an artist. There's a totally different way to communicate with different people and how they think. I like just really finding out what people are all about, and then from there determining who would be a great vendor for them in different categories. But just to make it a pleasant experience instead of something that's stressful. But it depends on what their learning style is and communication style.
So you went to school for education. Where was that at?
In Oregon. It was one of the top colleges at the time for education. It had like 97% placement back when the dinosaurs roamed, there was a glut of teachers. But every class we were in from day one, it was like, okay, if you were to teach this, and I always felt sorry for the pre-dentistry kids, but it was good for us to learn how to talk to kids.
So what kind of, after college, then where did you transition to, or what was kind of your entry into the job market after school?
I mostly worked at universities in different capacities. At one point, I even worked at an international agency that was housed on a campus. I couldn't get away from universities. I loved the environment where everything new and exciting was happening, and I got to meet people from all over the world. And ironically, not that it's really been planned as such, but most of the weddings that I've done have been people with different races or cultures. I don't know why that is, but and I'm also on the board for the Kent International Festival, so I enjoy that still.
Oh, absolutely. No, tons of, youthful energy and kind of lots of ideas and stuff kind of being in the university setting. So how did you, like you said, you kind of started getting roped into doing, events for family and friends and stuff. So how did that kind of transition go into that, where you found yourself all of a sudden, like, here, I'm helping to plan weddings that, I never planned on doing before?
Organization and attention to detail, that all fit in with everything. And I do like the tiny little details or ways to improve things like efficiency. Doesn't really matter what I'm working on. I'm always thinking there's a better way to do something. But it's fun. And I found that actually having worked in those environments helped me to just understand a variety of people in general. People from different countries and different backgrounds. It was nice.
What is it about weddings that excites you and inspires you to continue to work like you do?
Oh, well, I also officiate weddings. And with that, I mean, there's just nothing like being able to say words that bring about a look in their eyes that they've probably never had for each other. And you're right there in that moment when you pronounce them husband and wife. But for planning weddings, I basically make friends with everybody. And I still have one bride that I did their wedding many years ago. And I get invited to all the baby showers and birthdays. And so it's really a nice thing to get to know them for such a special day in their lives. And when you can make that into a day that they feel relaxed and they're enjoying it, it's a different experience than what a lot of people have without a planner.
Yeah, I always say that, we've had kind of other wedding planners and coordinators on the podcast in the past. And I always say, like, it's one of the hardest things to articulate the value of, because if a wedding planner is successful, it's almost like they weren't there, right? Because the guests, everybody had a great time. Things happened as they were supposed to, right? Like, people only know, if something bad happens, right? But if you do your job correctly, then everything goes off great. So how do you try to, convey your value to potential clients and have them realize the importance of having the wedding planner be a part of their day?
I think it's important to put them into the shoes that they will be in on their wedding day. And the fact that the most common time, along with videographers, by the way, they choose or recognize the value of a wedding planner just before or right after the wedding. That's too late. And I think they have to really, somehow I need to relay the picture to them of what the wedding day is really going to be like. And not be afraid to say, well, if you're going to do this or that, you need to think of a few more details. If they insist on something, I will just say, well, okay, this is what you might be able to expect. Are you ready for that? But no, it's a fun thing to just get to know the families too. And I'm sure a lot of people in the wedding industry, we all are, I say we're just like another one of the helping professions, that we go in with our hearts and blood, sweat, and tears.
So after you kind of started doing, like you said, some of the events for your friends and stuff, what kind of inspired to make the step to start your company, kind of be a wedding planner? How did that light switch flip?
I'd always been looking for something that I could do from my house and be something that I could. I wanted to find something where I could just be creative. And I found through all my so many different family members' weddings, huge families. And friends. In fact, I just found out that when I was writing the book, that one of the mothers, who was a friend of mine, but I helped with her daughter's wedding, she thought it was her daughter's wedding that might have been responsible for me getting into the business. And I said, no, it was somebody else. So, yeah, it's really fun to just think about what it was like and now how different it is. And having written a book about the wedding profession and speaking up for vendors and giving information that kind of counterbalances what they hear all the rest of the time.
Right. And your book is kind of about that, getting rid of that myth behind that things are overcharged and everything, right? Because it's a wedding, and kind of adding value, right? Is that kind of in a nutshell? And adding the value that vendors add and the monetary. Talk about kind of your elevator pitch for the book.
Weddings are pretty much as expensive as people want to make them. And I stress that they have to choose priorities. And just because you have so much money left in your budget, you can't say, well, I really would like this person, so I'm going to see if they'll take that amount of money and do whatever. It doesn't work like that. So I've stressed that wedding vendors invest so much time and money, and they don't think about like insurance and transportation and networking and everything else that makes them as good as they are at what they do. It doesn't just happen where you show up at the wedding and you've either had hours and hours of prep time, and on the other end of it, like with photographers, you have hours and hours of editing. I don't think people see that. So I tried in the book just to go through each category and let them see the nuances of what's involved. Just to get to where, well, my goal, I guess you would say with the book, is that I would like to see consultations start with something other than what's your budget and how much do you charge? I think if there's an appreciation for what is actually going to be the product and what goes into it, that they won't feel like they're being ripped off, which I haven't met hardly any vendors that are out to gouge anybody.
Do you think, having kind of gone through and talked, because part of your book was going through talking with different vendors, getting their processes, do you feel like that makes you a more well-rounded? I mean, obviously as a planner anyway, you're talking to a bunch of different vendor types, but do you feel like you're even more educated now in terms of what goes on behind the scenes and all the different people that you're kind of helping to wrangle for the wedding day?
Yes, it made me appreciate them even more. And for what they put up with too sometimes. So I really wanted to make it a win-win situation for people who are planning a wedding, but also the vendors, because I don't hear of many people saying anything from their viewpoint, or they were afraid to speak. That's why I kept everyone anonymous in my book, because I wanted them to be able to say what they really wished they could say without being fearful of them, losing some business or something like that, for the people that just wouldn't ever understand it. So I like, it feels good to kind of speak for my team.
Absolutely. So when you, like you said, you kind of been looking to, work from home, find a creative outlet, you're trying to get into weddings. Was the idea of starting the business and kind of going down this road, was that scary? Was that something that you felt like you had, I don't know, past history or family history about, entrepreneurship? I mean, how did that process go to like, well, I'm actually going to make a go at this thing?
The the knowing what to do for events wasn't nearly the problem as knowing what to do for the business part of it. I don't know what it is about creative minds not going over to the other side of numbers, and it was so frustrating with marketing, like what's going to work, what isn't going to work, and why is this one year good and the next year isn't so good. That I don't know if anybody really thinks about that too much when you go into a business that you're passionate about, but it probably would be really good to kind of review some accounting and that type of thing, or marketing, before you go into it, head first.
Yeah, no, it's always funny when we talk with, like you said, lots of creative types where, like if you're a photographer, actually taking, photos is such a small percentage of kind of what you do day to day. It's 3:55 right now, and I haven't edited any video today or shot any video, but it's been nonstop all day. So what was what was the biggest thing that surprised you about starting your business, or that you maybe like a lesson you learned, or that you felt like you could have been better prepared for, besides obviously, like I always say, yeah, having an accounting degree would have helped me a lot more than having a broadcast journalism degree. So,
I think the biggest surprise was how hard it is to get the word out of what you do, and to get that word out to the right people. I love networking, and I could really get caught up into that. But I have to say that networking has been one of those things that has led to the most consistent repeats of sources, you might say, for business. I never would have thought that BNI would have been that, but I was in it for a year, and I'm still getting jobs from that. I guess if you're just in the top of their mind for a particular area, and if you are kind of the one that stands out as being the unusual member in a group, or the one that always has to check other, that's beneficial, I guess, in the long run.
well, absolutely. I mean, and like you said, starting back in 2007, like you did, I mean, the world has shifted radically in terms of marketing and advertising and outreach and visibility. I mean, have you enjoyed kind of riding that over the last 12 years, or has that been challenging, or how have you had to, pivot what you did 10 plus years ago to what you're doing today?
That's a good question. I think that the part that has helped is just realizing that there are certain things you should only do what you're good at doing. Don't spend time doing those things that are on the peripheral that you hate to do. I'm beginning to realize the value of hiring more professionals for the other side of it. Writing the book, I never knew there were so many editors that you would have to hire. And it was like, what, another one? But I was very fortunate to have some great people that it was, I don't know, I learned that we're all really closely connected in one way or another, because the first person that I had do some structural editing on my book, I fully expected her to not understand when I explained to her what the book was about. And I get done and she says, well, I know everything you're talking about. And I went, what? I never hear that. And she says, well, a good friend of mine is, lo and behold, Angela Prophet. And she does sports celebrities' weddings in the Southeast. And she's, I noticed, keynote speaker at things like Wedding MBA or something like that. So I've had all kinds of little tiny coincidences that just made everything fall into place that I never thought would be connections to the industry. And thank goodness it's an evergreen topic. And people will always need professionals in the wedding industry.
Starting off and kind of getting into this, were you scared to kind of make that leap, or did you feel inspired to follow this passion, or what was it like early on?
I wasn't scared at all. I probably could have used a little bit more fear. I really wanted to learn as much as I could. And one of the first things I picked up was a banquet and events book. And I went through every single page to just figure out all the ins and outs of like venues, what they required and what people should ask. And I had done it for friends so many times that it wasn't like a totally foreign subject for me. But it was, I should have had more fear. Just a little bit more of realizing that, well, maybe that wouldn't work too well. Marketing and that thing, I didn't realize that as an entrepreneur that there are so many people that are just like ambulance chasers wanting to get your marketing dollars. And how can you really know what's going to work and what isn't? And it's different for different categories of wedding professionals too.
Looking back at some of those early weddings, do you, I look back at some of mine and, like you said, you kind of go into it, maybe not having your head all the way on straight or kind of not, I can definitely look back at things that I think that I could have done better or worse or, different. And do you look back and feel like you've grown a ton? Are you able to kind of think back fondly on early weddings, and what kind of was it like kind of getting started and getting your feet kind of going in the way that you need to go?
Yeah, I do look back on some and I'm going, wow, I've learned a lot since then. And yet I think that if you have your heart in the right place, you're going to do a good job. And if you're willing to think outside the box, but just always put the client first and listen like crazy to what they want. And I've got a pretty in-depth consultation form that I actually include in the book. By the end of a consultation, I have a good idea of every category of who would be the perfect person that would match their personalities and their vision for their wedding. But that's just another thing that people don't realize goes into our profession, is that it doesn't just happen. You spend a lot of time getting to meet everyone and knowing who their ideal client is and creating a win-win combination.
What kind of clients do you find that in couples that you like to work with, or that like to work with you and have you a part of kind of their wedding and their day?
I think the ones that have been through difficult experiences in life, I just love them, and I have a soft spot in my heart for ones who've either been through a rough childhood or diseases or anything like that. I think those people just have a different outlook on life. I find them to be the ones that give good reviews and the ones that have maybe had it pretty easy going don't always appreciate what you do. But I try to pick and choose who I work with.
Do you find now, having done this for so long, that you just have a lot of referrals that come in, or have you kind of had the shift how you find clients over the years just because of kind of the range of time that you've been in the industry?
Well, more and more it's referrals, but I think that it's in some ways I still find it unpredictable. And I did take time off for the book pretty much for a couple years, even though the majority of the work was done in about 3 or 4 months time. But there's, with any book, a lot of prep work. But it pays off in the long run. Just a lot of organization. And I didn't want it to be just my opinion, so I wanted to talk to other people, and especially the ones that I hadn't worked with too much as vendors. I thought it was important to get in contact with them. I enjoyed it.
Do you feel like what was your wedding like, and do you feel like that kind of helps direct kind of how I've always said I'm a better, wedding vendor, kind of having gone through that process and kind of been on both sides. What was your wedding like, first of all? And then how does that kind of reflect now how you are as a wedding vendor and relate to the industry?
Things were so different back then. I don't know if I want to say how many years I've been married, but
just a few.
Suffice it to say that it was okay back then to just have cake and punch and coffee and nuts and mints. And, it was at my parents' house, and then a reception 2 doors down at the school auditorium. However, I have always, every single piece of wedding cake I've ever tasted or sampled, I compare it to the cake that we had at our wedding. There's only been 2, but I found that were that good. And I have to admit, maybe there was an advantage there because the person that baked our wedding cake baked the governor's cakes in the state where we were. Growing up in the capital city, yeah, that happens.
That's fascinating. Give me the background of that. That's too funny. Fill me in on the details of that.
That cake?
Well, no, just how did you wind up getting that? That's funny.
It was just friends that referred people back then. I just asked around. My aunt actually knew the person that baked the cakes. Where did
you guys get married? What city?
Down in Salem, Oregon.
Okay, in the capital of Oregon. So that was the cakes of the government. That's too fast. That's funny.
And I won't name any names except that it was just a good cake, and it had all the check marks to check off for a good cake.
Do you find, having obviously, I would hope having kind of a joyous, occasion and bringing together family and friends, being able to kind of replicate that for other couples. I can just see kind of the smile on your face just in general as you kind of talk about what you do. But do you talk about kind of the fulfillment or how you do that for other people, or do you find joy in kind of giving them this kind of experience that you had and that you've seen other people have?
My own wedding was rather boring. And it's so vastly different than what I'd want to plan now for someone else. But I do like to see people go from thinking that something isn't possible to figuring out a way to make it possible. maybe with a little bit of a twist or dual purposing on something that cuts some of the money out of the costs. But just having been in the industry, just knowing things that never cross other people's minds, that's like planning your honeymoon first, because those costs fluctuate much, much more than wedding budget expenses for the wedding itself. And if people plan in that regard, they have more money for the wedding.
How did you transition, because like even looking at your site here, obviously weddings, but business, corporate events, birthdays, personal celebrations, anniversaries, obviously, and then celebrations of life. How did you kind of, was it just a natural progression to expand your services kind of out to those other areas, or how did you kind of make that, spread that web out in terms of the various services you offer?
I think that what you have to do a lot of times is do the things that other people don't want to do. Celebration of life events scare some people. And I think because I started my business at age 50, okay, I'm going to give away my age here pretty soon. You've been through a few things like that. And, that was part of what I planned too. And believe it or not, those are the most rewarding events for me to plan. Because to make somebody feel better during that period of time, and to just hear them say, oh, this is perfect, or this is exactly what I would have wanted. And I'm still connecting weddings and celebration of life events. I still say that a lot of the weird behavior that we see is usually at weddings and funerals. My theory is that the reason why people get so weird with weddings sometimes too is that they don't know it, but they're grieving. It's a big change in everybody's lives. Friends are going to say, oh, am I losing my friend? Mothers and fathers are going to be saying, time is going by way too fast. I'm not 25 anymore. They see their kids grow up. It makes them feel old. There's just a lot of different emotions that go into weddings that I think people don't know what they're dealing with. But I do think it's grief in a different format.
That's fascinating. How did you get into officiating as well? Was that just a natural offshoot as well? Or because I know a lot of planners and a lot of officiants, I don't know a ton of kind of dual purpose.
Yeah. Well, first of all, my husband started out doing that, and I was doing the planning. And he got one bad review and, thin-skinned or whatever. And he says, I'm not doing this. This isn't worth it. And I said, oh, I don't like the sound of that. So I decided that I was going to officiate too. And he didn't do any more. But I got the privilege. I love it. But it was just kind of like, well, if you're not going to do it, I am going to do something about it. It's kind of like my attitude in a lot of things. Like, nobody else is writing about this. I'm going to write about it.
Do you enjoy, and I know you had said a little earlier about, saying the words and kind of married, but do you enjoy kind of being, I think with a planner, a little more behind the scenes, obviously officiating, you're, a little more, in the center of things, right? I mean, you're part of the ceremony. Do you enjoy being on both sides, or how do you kind of balance the two?
As a planner, it does come in handy, and it makes people get some sense of relief that even if the person that's going to marry them that day doesn't show up for whatever reason, that I'm going to make sure they're married. And for that reason, I request their ceremony so that I can do that no matter what. And it is very funny, though, to see how you're treated as an officiant compared to a wedding planner, it's night and day sometimes. I almost have to laugh because when you're an officiant, people are so careful about their language around you. And I go, I'm going to be the one that slips up on that. Don't worry about it. And it's just a different thing where they have this, I don't know, they're more in awe of what you do or something, or they really are on much better behavior.
Do you enjoy being in front though, and kind of being able to kind of run the wedding from the other side?
One thing I like is to be able to enforce the unplugged wedding. I really appreciate from that standpoint, like turn your phones off, turn your cameras off, put your tablets away, because it messes up a lot of things. And like in the book, I don't know, it's my weird sense of humor, but I say, flabby arms, backsides, and bald spots don't make good pictures. So think about it before you get to running into the aisle and blocking the photographer or the videographer shot. They're the pros, let them do their job. So at least I have a little bit of authority as the officiant to have some say in what kind of wedding it's going to be like. That maybe, some friend that decided that he was going to do their wedding wouldn't know.
What do you find the most joy of doing in terms of just kind of day-to-day work? Where do you find inspiration? Where do you keep getting excited kind of every day to do new things?
Oh, every time I have a consultation and I get a sense of people recognizing that they want help, it makes it so that I'm excited to help them and that they get it. And I guess it's just a matter of giving them ideas that they might not have thought about. I've never ever had a consultation, whether it was officiating or for planning, where someone hasn't said, oh, I never would have thought of that. And I think about that, like, okay, on the wedding day, what would it have been like if they didn't know about that? And it's just getting to know people on a different level, that you can be perfect strangers, and then within a few weeks and a few consultations, you just feel like you've made a new friend. And you get to spend so much time with them as a planner compared to most professions that you're bound to get to know them really well. And for the most part, 99% of the time, it's a good thing. I've found out that there are some professions in particular that if I know that that's what a couple does, I say, no, you're not my kind of client. I won't say what they are, but they don't quite get anywhere near the creative part of the brain. And it's just harder to communicate with them.
What do you wish more people knew about, wedding planning and the process? I mean, obviously, you wrote a whole kind of book on the subject, but I mean, what do you wish, just specifically in terms of like what you do in your role, that you wish more couples asked, or that you find you're, telling people, more than, what do you wish more people knew?
Oh, I've got a book about that. Oh man. There's so much that they can't help it. You just don't know what you don't know. And it's not something that they do every day, that has so many moving parts, that if I could get them to understand that it's a complicated day. And not only that, Mother Nature, Murphy's Law, whatever, does not care one iota if it's somebody's wedding day. That you have to just get your mindset that we're going to enjoy this day and we're not going to sweat the small stuff. Because I can't guarantee to anybody what the weather's going to be like, or who's going to get a flat tire, who's going to show up drunk. I have nothing to do with that. That they have to see reality for what it is, and that realize that I'm there to protect them. I'm not there to take over their wedding. What I'm doing is to make their day go more smoothly, and hopefully they won't have regrets that they might have had otherwise.
What do you do when you're not working on, all the things that you're doing? What do you do in your free time? What do you do, if there is any, what do you do to find pleasure kind of in your life outside of work? What do you wish more people knew about you, Janis, personally?
It's been a long time since I've taken up some of my old hobbies. I love volunteering in my community. That's something that keeps me inspired. And I even had a business coach tell me that I shouldn't do so much volunteer work. And I cut some of it out, and I realized I missed it too much. And it's what kept me going. It kept me inspired in a different way, but it kept my energy level up. And when I didn't have that, I think that we all need to get involved in our communities and really be a part of a solution. And like I said, I'm with the Kent International Festival. And it's the best experience.
What is the status of the book, and is it out yet? I feel like the last time I saw, we were getting ready, or we were picking art, or so where's it at? What's the title? I know we've talked a lot about it, but what is the skinny of that if people are interested, and when is it coming out and available?
I returned an edited version of the mock-up, and the design's all approved, and I am told that the publishing takes 2 weeks, and I don't know how long they're going to do for the editing changes that I made, but we're probably looking in July or August sometime for the book to be out on Amazon and book and ebook form.
And what's the title of it?
Oh, it got changed just slightly. It's Wedding Planning Unmasked! Wedding
and
planning
just again, it's a little, you went through, interviewed a bunch of different vendor types, kind of got their processes, why people charge what they do, why certain skills, or why you should invest in certain people and things like that, correct?
Yeah. To give them to just give them an appreciation for what goes on behind the scenes, and how much it isn't just fun and games like people think. They think that a DJ just plays music, and that's just something really fun to do. There's an awful lot of work that goes into it, and I want them to know that. And I also want people to not try to rip vendors off pretending it's something else that they want. I want them to be honest.
Because that was kind of one of the things too that sparked it, right? Was the news? It was saying, if you tell people it's a birthday party versus a wedding, and that was kind of what spiraled the whole thing, right? Yeah,
and that if you drove up to a floral shop in a fancy car, they would automatically charge you more. When you know how hard people work, that was just hard to take.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. Like I said, kind of last minute after a cancellation and kind of working through the technical stuff that we had to kind of get set up. And I really appreciate, obviously, you taking your time. And, it's just kind of a wealth of knowledge and years and expertise. And it means a lot for you to kind of sit down. And I know we had chatted before, and it's good to kind of catch up again and see you face to face, even if it is online here.
Yeah.
If people want to learn more about you, Janis, and your company and wedding planning and things like that, obviously we've talked about the book too, but where would you have them go to check out about your wedding planning company?
greatestofdays.com. And for updates on the book, the Facebook page is probably the best place. It's Greatest of Days on Facebook. So, yeah, it's getting really close. So I'm hoping that we have a book signing soon.
Well, that'll be exciting. We'll have to share and keep me posted, and we'll promote it and get the word out there. And I so appreciate your time today. I know it's, especially this time of year, it's busy, and days off, or at least hours off, are very needed. And so I appreciate you taking the time to do this. When it's a beautiful day outside, and we're here catching up in line. So.
Yeah, well, it's just fun to do things, hey, we have to turn on a dime anyway, right?
we got to do it. We got to do it. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. If you are a wedding vendor and are interested in participating on the podcast, we do have a link. You can go to bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest, and that's a little questionnaire that you can fill out if you'd like to submit. Obviously, I kind of knew you previously, didn't kind of make you go through that, but if you're a new vendor interested in kind of participating in this fun experiment that we've been working on for the last year and a half, I would appreciate you taking the time to fill out that questionnaire. We can get started. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thanks so much.